What's up, guys? I'm Damien. Once again, thanks for coming to my channel and taking a look at the Decent Espresso machine. If you didn't watch the last video, I've had this guy now for about a week. I'm a very active beta tester. In the past week, I've put almost 2 pounds of coffee in it between basically 1.5 people. My girlfriend, when she was here, and myself have been going through coffee like crazy. So I'm going to basically just kind of go through what I think of it so far, just a couple minutes, and then we're actually going to pull a shot. I'll make a latte. You can check it out for yourself. Pros and cons. So one of the first things that I like about this machine is that it is very much form follows function, right? It's not a bunch of shiny things and dials and gizmos and things like that that is designed to look pretty. It's a sleek black box essentially. With everything kind of laid out the way it should be, and then the tablet interface, because it's completely customizable as people give feedback and things of that nature. That part is only going to get better. So all the controls kind of being built into that is really cool. The amount of data that you get out of this machine is unparalleled. In fact, we don't really even know what to do with it just yet. There's so much coming out of the machine that it's kind of new ground when it comes to coffee, right? Being able to see in real time a chart of everything that's happening with pressure and temperature and flow rate, and how that has an effect on the taste of the coffee, what you need to do to change it to improve it, what kind of different methods of extraction produce different coffee. It's cool. So I think it's really exciting from those people that are geeks or nerds like me that want to see the high-tech stuff. It's cool. The coffee. Obviously, this is the most important thing. Does the stuff that comes out of that group head taste good? Absolutely. Definitively, yes. I'm not using the best grinder. I still have a Virtuoso Preciso by Baratza. It's not a bad grinder by any stretch, but I'm certainly seeing maybe some limitations of that. So for me, I think that's probably my next upgrade will be to a better grinder. However, I'm making as good, if not definitely better coffee than with my previous machine that, I've been massaging and working on and using for the past 7 years. So I was really good with that machine, and I took to the Decent really, really quick. The steam feature of this machine, the fact that it's extra hot, it's 160 degrees Celsius versus your typical 120. It's available immediately. You pull a shot, you switch to steam, you go. It's super powerful, it's super quick. I can make really, really nice foam with it. That is great. I'm not used to that because my previous machine had a regular steam boiler, or pardon me, a regular boiler for espresso, and then a thermoblock dedicated to steam, which was a little anemic. I could work with it, but this is a whole new animal. So, the $64,000 question, is it worth it? When this machine actually does go on sale to the general public, outside of the beta, and people are buying it, we're talking about, I don't know, between $2,500 and $4,000 plus. Is it worth it? Yeah, definitively yes. It is obviously making very, very, very great coffee. At least it gives you the ability to, if you know what you're doing. Technique is still really important here. It's not just going to be magic and create something from nothing. But it makes really good coffee. The data that it gives you so that you can improve your coffee is tremendous. And the one thing I'll say about it, because it has these sensors and it knows what's happening, is that sometimes I've actually seen it sort of rescue a bad shot of mine, right? One of the things that you'll see in a standard machine is spurting, where you'll have a pinhole in your puck and all of a sudden you'll see coffee just start firing into the side of your espresso machine or whatever. That's going to ruin your shot. It's going to be sour. It's whatever might happen. I've yet to see pinholing or spurting effectively show up in a shot from the Decent, and I think it's because as the pressure changes, the machine is able to compensate for those changes and reduce flow rate, whatever it needs to do to try to avoid that from happening. Now, I have reasonable technique, so that helps, but basically, like I said, it's able to save shots that may otherwise go down the sink, which is kind of cool. Another thought to consider from like a cafe perspective, one of the things that's very cool about this is that it's logging all of the data for you. And one of the neat things we've seen as beta testers is we've uploaded all of our graphs to our forums that we've been talking to other testers about, and John's given his feedback, John Buckman from Decent, and others. And one of the things that's kind of amazing about it is I can look at a graph of somebody's shot and say, I bet that tasted this way, or I bet, was that a little sour? This might be something you can change. You might try to lower the dose and up the up the pressure, or whatever, change the pre-infusion. The cool thing about that is, from a cafe perspective, if I'm a head barista or a manager of a cafe, I can look at these shot profiles and basically adjust things on the fly without ever having to touch or taste the coffee, which I guess that can be negative, but it also means that I'm not going to go into a caffeine heart attack. But I don't need to taste the coffee. I don't even need to see it. You're able to actually get so much data just from a graph, and I think that's really kind of huge where this is going. And imagine, this being output, because it has an HDMI output. You can output these machines to a screen, or even the logs themselves that are captured, and a manager or cafe can go through these at the end of the day and actually make adjustments based on that. Right? Really neat. Just this is new ground. Now, there's negatives. There are some negatives, and none of these I don't think are really all that major. They're not really showstoppers. The beauty is that for the most part, Decent did a great job of nailing the hardware. Things seem solid. They work. There are just a couple of things that I don't like. The drip tray, number one. I love the ceramic. I think that's a brilliant use of ceramic, porcelain as they call it, whatever. It's very sanitary. It's easy to clean. I like the fact that it's not going to color my water at all. The drip tray itself, the drip tray cover, is made from a cast aluminum that just feels cheap. I know it isn't, because I know they went through a number of iterations. It just doesn't feel great. And I think they're already addressing that. From what I understand, they're going to go to stainless steel with that. So there's a lot of UI stuff also in there that definitely, as somebody, I went to art school, I dabble in some design here and there. There's a lot of changes that I would make from a UI perspective. UI UX is really important. I basically am in technical software sales for a living, so UI is kind of everything. And that'll get there, I think. There's just, sometimes when you have engineers kind of designing things, they tend to think in a bit of a narrow focus, and they're not thinking for the average consumer, right? So there's some things that are not obvious that need to be. Just changes in core UI will be helpful. Everything is there. It's easy enough to find, and there are some bugs that need to be worked out. Like, for instance, the timer to turn the machine on in the morning doesn't work. At least for me. I think it might for some other people, but it definitely doesn't for me. So I have it set to start at 6 a.m., turn off at 9, and it doesn't turn on. And that's not a big deal, because as you'll see later, this machine heats up in like 4 minutes. So I get up, I tap the screen to turn it on, and I go and do other stuff like feed my cat and whatever for the next couple of minutes, and I come back and it's already warmed up. Unlike my last machine, which took at least a half an hour for it to really be stable. So that's not necessarily a terrible thing. And then sound. I'm going to add sound in here as a con, only because it's very non-traditional in the way it sounds. It's kind of got this very mechanical, tuck 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 tuck, as the pumps make odd sounds. It doesn't have that thrum or no sound like a lever machine. So that can be a little distracting. It's not loud, so it doesn't. You can actually have a normal conversation right over the sound of that pouring espresso. So it's not terrible. But speaking of sound, the other thing that is kind of is there's a fan in there that cools off the circuit board when it's done, basically. So you actually might even be able to hear it running right now. But the fan that is running, it's fairly quiet, but in an otherwise quiet room, you can hear it. And it runs, because this machine is very thermally efficient, it'll run for a solid 45 minutes or so, maybe longer, after the machine is actually off as it cools down. And what it's doing is it's trying to prevent condensation from forming on any of the internal parts. So it's there for a reason. Decent tells me that they have plans to actually reduce the fan volume, fan speed, because right now it's basically just running at max. That will maybe make it a lot quieter. Right now it's you notice it. So again, it's not very loud, but in a quiet room, it's a little bit louder than my refrigerator, and I can hear it, and it's annoying for a while. Okay. All right. So with that being said, why don't we make some coffee? Okay. So first off, here's my setup. So so you can see what I've got going on here in my kitchen. I have my Decent machine here, of course, and sorry for the tight shot, I'm using a sort of a telephoto lens here. And my Decent machine with the tablet now fully mounted. I am using a Baratza Preciso, or Preciso if you want to call it, for my grinder. That's probably in need of an upgrade at this point. There's my beans in my container, and for anybody that knows what this might be, this fun little tamper right there happens to be the original ZPM tamper from my first beta machine from them. Okay, now the machine is totally cold. I haven't touched it yet. I'm going to actually just tap the screen, which is all you need to do to turn it on and wake it up. But we're going to start a little timer just so we can actually prove how long this thing takes to turn on. So let's start this first. If I can get a focus, that'd be super. Okay, and tap the screen. Boop. And you see on the right hand side it actually says espresso heating, and you see the temperature right now is at, what's it showing for me? 82 degrees metal. Goal is 190. So once that's done, we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. It's been 3 minutes 45 seconds at this point, coming up on 4. And we're at 186 degrees metal, and you actually see the espresso ready. So at this point, the machine can compensate for any changes in temperature that has. So we're ready. 4 minutes basically is where we're at. I'll make a straight shot of espresso first in a clear glass so you can see what that looks like. And I think let me show you a couple of the features of the actual interface while we do that. So right now I'm looking at the last shot that I did, which was kind of an experiment, so ignore what it shows. But some of the things I can do from this screen is, the first thing I'll do is I actually do a flush. So flush shot is exactly what it says it is. I'm going to go ahead and hit start. It's not as loud as it sounds. I can talk in a normal conversation over this. And now essentially all I'm doing is putting some hot water into my glass so I can pre-warm it. And this, like I said in the preview, it's showing me the total volume here, and it's doing some funky things. This is a UI bug. You can see it's now counting up. I'll stop it. Normally you'd be able to set the amount that you want in your flush, and it will stop automatically. It's not doing that right now, so you just have to stop it manually, which is not a huge deal, but in a busy setting, obviously, it might be useful to be able to kind of go back and forth. So you can see down here I've got a glass full of slightly muddy water because I didn't do a very good job of cleaning the group yesterday when I got done with it. Okay, once we've flushed it, I'll go back to the espresso tab. And one of the other things I want to point out as something that I kind of noted as a negative, and something that will probably get changed as this moves along, is on the right hand side, this little blue pip you see here. It's tough to see, number one, and that's part of the reason why I don't like it. That actually indicates your water level in the machine. When it gets down somewhere towards the bottom here, it will start to flash to let you know that it's low. It will eventually tell you on screen that it's low on water, but it's just not very obvious. Once you know it's there, fine, but you know, these things need to be a little bit more clear. So anyhow, I'm now looking at the previous graph from my last shot, and you can see on the right it says flow profile, and this is a gentle pre-infusion flow. Okay, I can click this gear button, setting button, and that will take me into what this actually looks like. So this is so to kind of talk about really quickly the difference between a pressure profile and a flow profile. If you know anything about cameras, you kind of know that the aperture follows the shutter speed and vice versa. So as you change the shutter speed, the aperture has to change the aperture, the shutter speed has to change. Flow and pressure profiles are very much kind of the same way in a lot of ways, not quite as linear, obviously, as they are in a camera. But basically, you're able to program into the Decent machine whether you want to use a pressure profile, which means that the machine should do everything in its power to maintain the pressure curve that you've identified, which means changing the flow rate to achieve that. Or do you want a flow profile, which means the opposite? I want to maintain a very specific flow rate, and the pressure is going to be totally variable. I hope that makes sense. It'll probably make sense a little bit more when we actually pull one of these. So you're able to adjust pre-infusion. I can make it really kind of as long as I want. I think 60 seconds is the maximum, so not as long as I want, but a minute. Most of them are kind of preset as 20 seconds. With a flow profile you see here in this particular one that we're looking at, this pre-infusion goes for 30 seconds. And basically there's a trigger here, this little checkbox that says rise. Once it gets above 4 bar of pressure, then we're going to kick into the hold phase, which basically means kind of boost the pressure up a bit, or pardon me, boost the flow rate up a bit, because we're starting the flow rate out at 3.5 milliliters per second for that pre-infusion. We boost the flow rate up once it's been triggered that we're gaining pressure, and then we're going to hold that for 20 seconds, and then at 2.2 milliliters, and then there is no decline. So basically it's just going to run like that until I stop the shot. That's essentially the way this particular one works. I'm going to go back to a preset because the one I'm going to make is a flow profile for milky drinks, because I've dialed this one in fairly well, and we're going to make a latte eventually anyway, so I'll show you what this looks like. So if I click on that, you'll see essentially what this one does is a 20-second pre-infusion. If it rises within that time frame, it'll trigger the next phase. For 30 seconds, we're going to hold at 2 milliliters per second, and hopefully that will have us at around 9 bar. That's what we're aiming for, basically, with no decline. So the pressure should actually decline on its own because the flow rate is remaining the same, and as the puck erodes, less pressure is inherently there because there's less material, right? So that's what the profile should look like. That's what we're hoping for, and we'll see it when we do it. So I'll click OK to have that profile, and you'll see now that it's loaded in here. So now I'm going to prep my puck. You don't need to see that, so I'll be right back. Okay, my basket's prepared. I have, for reference, this is 21 grams in an 18 gram Decent basket. So we'll lock it in here. And as I said, this is where the second portafilter handle goes. It's right here. I don't really need it. It's locked in place just fine. The machine holds its ground when I do that. Now, this is clear glass, and we will hit start. Now you can see on the machine that it's doing a final heating. I'll hear it click. There it goes. Now we're actually starting the pre-infusion. So you can see that line running 4 milliliters per second for 20 seconds is the goal. We're at 10 right now. Come down here to the... So here's our shot. Really low volume. I'm going to taste it anyway. Why not? So you know it's not bad. It's probably better than you'll get at a lot of shops. A little on the bitter side, probably because the pressure there was a little bit on the high side. But we'll give it another go. I'll grind a little bit coarser. Now I could change a couple of things here. I could either reduce my dose or grind a little bit coarser with the same dose to see if I can kind of lower that pressure and nail that line a little bit better. But maybe I'll based on the compression there that I see in the puck. Oh, here's another thing too. Let me point this out too. So if I tap on this graph, I can actually get a sort of a blow up of my curves. This wiggly line that I see as the pressure rises, that usually indicates channeling. So that's a barista problem. That would be me. Part of that might actually have to do with the fact that I'm using a 58 millimeter tamper in these VST or Decent baskets, which are actually 58.7. So I do have a little bit of wiggle room around the edge of that basket, which I have a new base on the way that I'll get here today. It's 58.5 millimeters, so we're going to see if that makes a difference. But I can see that I had a little bit of channeling that kind of sealed itself as the pressure rose, and then it was nice and smooth. So what I think I'll probably do is reduce the dose a little bit just to lower that pressure and leave everything else the same. Okay, so I've actually gone ahead and made 2 changes because I'm a terrible person. Don't be like me. So I lowered the dose to 20 grams from 21, so we're going to try a little bit of a lower dose. But the other thing that I did is I actually raised my pre-infused time to 25 seconds instead of 20, because as we saw before on that chart, I was starting to build pressure with the pre-infuse before I got to the actual ramp up, but just not quite in time. So I'd rather adjust that a little bit so that you know, the pre-infusion is complete before I change too much. So I'll go ahead and hit OK, and that's basically going to lock in those settings. So let's see how we did with that. Now, I'm putting my, oh, one thing I forgot to do. I do have a 1/10 of a gram accurate scale here that I use that I neglected to use for the last shot. So I'm going to do that now. It's hard to do everything with one hand. Zero it out. Good. Okay. Get the handle out of the way so I can read it. Awesome. We're at 0. We're loaded. And let's fire. Alright, so let's just watch the screen this entire time. Let's see if what we did affected anything. Remember, so we're 1 gram lighter on the dose, and we have 5 seconds of extra pre-infusion. So final heating, wait for the click. Boom, there it is. Here comes the pre-infuse. So let me go back to the full chart. Okay, so you can see the pressure's already rising now at 15 seconds, 20 seconds. There we go. See that? No spike. We're following that flow line. Interestingly though, my pressure only got up to about 7 bar. Let's look at the coffee. I mean, not terrible. I'd like to see about 40 grams there. Now it's stopped on its own. I can extend that if I want to, but if this were an 18 gram shot, then I was right in the right spot. But we did 20 grams. Now, here's what our curve looks like. You can see that that pressure curve was ridden really, really tight, really close, and that was a function of me increasing the pre-infusion time, because you can see that during my pre-infuse, the pressure built naturally until about 25 seconds there. And then my pressure only got up to about 7 bar before it started to decline, so I probably could have kept the same dose, honestly, and that's what happens when you change more than one variable at a time. So I could have gone 21 grams, left it alone, and I probably would have gotten a bit of a nicer pressure curve. That being said, this coffee does not look terrible. It's got some nice tiger spotting going on in there. Obviously that's all crema. And now we're going to do some steam and make this into a latte. Okay, so I'm going to hit my steam button real quick. You can see it's ready to go. And I'm just going to purge it real fast. You can hear this thing, this outputs a ton of steam. Stop it. And I'll restart. I have about 200 milliliters of 2% milk in here. If I can get a nice whirlpool really, really quickly, now it's 40 seconds, according to my timer there. The jury's still out on whether or not I need to do a purge after I've steamed my milk. I do it anyway, just out of habit. There's supposedly some sort of positive pressure thing that happens that prevents milk from being sucked back up into the wand, but better safe than sorry. Now, hopefully this coffee hasn't been sitting for too long. Let's get a look at this lovely microfoam. Hopefully it came out okay, given that I'm on camera. pour. Not my greatest work. Terrible. But, lovely foam.